All right, we'll go get started. Is that feedback? No, okay, good. Speaking in Denver is always really dangerous because you're just talking about, you start talking faster and faster, and you take a breath, and next thing you know. So if I end up laid out on the floor, somebody just come and kick me. So can everybody hear me okay? Good, excellent. So we're at a very interesting moment in mixed reality. It's a moment that we kind of feel like is part of a much larger story. And we're not really sure what the next milestone is. We're kind of in it right now. It's just very possible that the next milestone is happening right now. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the best way to approach getting into a technology when you're not really sure which direction it's going to go. With any technology, the strategy of just kind of sitting back and waiting to see how things shake out before you take a first step isn't really an option. So how do you kind of approach entering mixed reality media and get into it? So today we'll be looking at some of the work that we've done. I have with me today, figuring out a new computer here, Dan Dennehy who is the head of visual resources at Minneapolis Institute of Art, and then Samantha Diamond, who's the CEO of CultureConnect, and they'll be speaking in just a moment. What's that? Okay. And I'm Richey. I'm the creative director of experimentation and development at Crystal Bridges. So before I go into some of our VR work at Crystal Bridges, I want to talk a little bit about the way we experiment and approach innovation at Crystal Bridges. Crystal Bridges is a museum open to the public in 2011 with a mission of providing access to art for all. Since that time, we've welcomed about 4 million people, that's including 200,000 students as part of a school program, school visit program that reimburses any costs associated with bringing students into the museum for any school within driving distance. We made it a priority for Crystal Bridges to be a very innovative space. The location, the building's architecture, the collection, the exhibition have all been have all gotten attention that we kind of wanted since we opened. Adding to that, we're opening a contemporary art and performing arts space in 2020 that's an old craft cheese plant that we're repurposing for this purpose. But these are all very big, kind of the big wave makers, and not really something that's a sustainable model for innovation for an organization, unless you just think that you can continue on at that pace. So what we've been doing for the last couple of years is actively looking for ways that we can kind of make exploration and experimentation part of the system of how we work at all levels of the staff. So what we're doing is we're kind of taking this smaller approach. So as creative director of experimentation and development, it's my job to kind of look at training, operations, and professional development to kind of support that innovation across the museum. And the project that I'll be showing today is kind of encapsulates that approach to how we're trying to make experimentation and innovation a part of what we're doing. So the Crystal Bridges Virtual Reality Project, it's not really a project, it's more just kind of this umbrella branding for all of the mixed reality projects that we're working on. But like I said, it kind of acts as a nice summary of the way we're approaching experimentation. So all the projects we'll be talking about today, they're very small, they're pilot, they're experiments. Along with that are very, very small budgets. That's by design. We don't want to get really bogged down in building a large project. Timelines are also very short. Basically nothing that we're looking at today was kicked off with the plan to really launch it to the public. We kind of start small and scale up. And that's so that we can try things that we're not sure if they'll work or that we're pretty sure won't work, but they'd be interesting to try. Focus here. There we go. We also aggressively seek out partners and collaborators to work with us on this. This is one way that we can kind of cheat the small budget and the short timeline challenge in this. We find partners who either want to partner with us through funding or through expertise or experience. But this has been a really good way for us to get into get into some of these technologies that we don't have the ability to really dig into in-house, that we really want to experiment with. We look for people who are interested in kind of going on a little bit of a journey with us, and like I said, building something that may not work. We also approach it as more of a let's see what we can learn, as opposed to let's see what we can do. And what this does for us is when we separate our expectation from launching a fully baked product and more into let's just throw something at the wall and see what sticks. So we have this idea and we want to see where it goes. That really allows us to make some decisions, like I said, that may be foolhardy if we had things like museum attendance or profits associated with it. So one of the big questions that a lot of us struggle with internally, and I've heard a lot of people talk about last year and this year, is kind of why now? What is the reason for starting to invest in this technology? There's been a very rapid evolution of VR, AR, and 3D, or mixed reality over the last couple of years. And one of the best examples I can use to kind of show what that rapid evolution is like is what's been on display the last couple of years at South by Southwest. So in 2017, just by the way, I've learned to never show images like this to curators when you're trying to build support for in-gallery virtual reality, because their idea of this future dystopia of VR is everybody standing in the space that they very carefully curated with seeing things covering their eyes. So yeah, don't use images like this inside your gallery. In 2017, everybody at South by Southwest, and I'm speaking from my experience here, but everybody there seemed to have a VR project. It wasn't just the interactive people, it was the filmmakers and the musicians and the visual artists. Everybody had something that they were plugging there. And the tone of these projects was kind of interesting. It was almost like this kind of acid flashback aesthetic to mixed reality. This was a very interesting piece. It was dancing cats, popping bottles of champagne, very frantic, very fast, very colorful. It was kind of this lo-fi internet meme meets Lisa Frank that has massive amounts of funding to kind of build these big projects. But to me, it was very apparent that mixed reality was a thing. It was something that we needed to pay attention to, but wasn't really sure how. I went back to Crystal Bridges with this idea that was something that we needed to look into, but wasn't really sure how this would fit into what we were trying to do as a museum. And then if you jump to 2018, I got there this year and walked into the virtual cinema, and immediately I was very concerned because it was the frantic energy of the previous year just absolutely was not there. It was a very quiet space. And with the exception of a few pieces like that acid flashback from the previous year was completely gone. But as I got in there and started viewing some of the works, I kind of, my confidence in going in this direction started coming back a little bit. It was apparent that the shift was a very positive one for museums. Most of the work was very quiet and was introspective. It was focused on narrative and empathy, just exactly the things that we're hoping to get out of a new technology from a museum, in a museum. So a couple of examples. This is a piece that was called Sanctuaries of Silence. It was, this filmmaker basically took the viewer into the last places on Earth that were completely free from human-made sound pollution. These very quiet places that were just beautiful imagery. And then he contrasted that to the environments that we're normally used to living in to kind of show you and highlight exactly what that meant. There were other pieces on the left. Was a piece called Sun Ladies. This is the all-female brigade that's fighting ISIS. It kind of took you into, put you first-person perspective into their environment. It was very powerful. The one on the left was a piece called That Was Authentically Us. It was a look at how transgender people fit into the culture of indigenous North America. And again, both of these pieces to me were very powerful and left with kind of what I felt like we needed to be looking for in connecting people to art in our museum. It left us thinking, and I couldn't really get it out of my mind, these things that I learned, and I wanted to go and explore farther. And I think that was from putting you in this immersive environment of what they were trying to tell you about, talk about in these pieces. So in 2017, I left with this idea that we needed to look into this. This is where we needed to be in this space, but with this kind of ball of anxiety in my stomach of how in the hell do we take cats popping champagne bottles and fit that to what we're doing. And then this year, whenever I left, I felt like we were on the right track because what we were producing at this point was much closer to what these pieces were looking at. The conversation had kind of changed completely. So taking that back to Crystal Bridges, we were very interested in kind of creating this immersive narrative through a lot of our works. So these are just a couple of projects that we're kind of exploring right now. So several of you are familiar with the projects from the Tate and the Modigliani exhibition, the Over Atelier that they did earlier this year, and then the older Bosch VR, these ideas of walking, creating a VR walkthrough of a painting. What we're looking to do is create this experiment in immersive narrative. So this is Francis Guy's Winter Scene in Brooklyn painting. It's from 1820. It's a city scene he painted from the second floor of his studio. And because he painted this exact scene 5 times over several years around 1820, we know a lot about what's going on in this painting. We know where the studio is located. It's at 11 Front Street, and it's an address that still exists today in Brooklyn. It is actually right directly under the Brooklyn Bridge now. If you overlay the Google Map view, which we do in the gallery of this, the Brooklyn Bridge would go just right down the right side of the painting. And we also know who the people who were in the painting. Styles wrote a book, A History of the City of Brooklyn, back in 1860 that basically gave us a key of who all these people were. And not only identified who they were, but what they did to kind of a little bit of their history. We can accurately place this scene from the painting in real space. And so we approached, we were looking for a partner to work with us on this, and we got really lucky. There's an institute at the University of Arkansas, it's just right up the street, called Tesseract. And they're a video game design and research group that is led by, it's actually housed in and led by humanities department. And so this having a tech basically design agency led by a humanities professor is pretty much perfect for us. Timelines are not kind of what we want, but their approach to technology is great. But partnering with them allowed us to kind of go into this and build this out as a prototype that we can test, and if we like it, we can scale it up. But they're doing the heavy lifting on the technology. They have the ability and the skills in-house to do this, and they know what it means to build out this narrative, as opposed to if we were working with a design agency or a true video game design group, there would be some education there. So we're starting to get an understanding of what this space would look like as you were walking through in the first person's perspective. We can build out this VR scene and populate it with people, and that's really the easy part for this. We realized the very difficult part is figuring out how to focus on the story. And going back to the painting earlier, so we know who all of these people are in the painting, and we know what their situation was. There were city officials, there were free slaves, there were slaves, there were slave owners, all in the painting interacting together. So what we want to do is to allow somebody to go in. Normally, what we would do is the audio guide for this piece would describe what all the people in the painting are, but it doesn't really give you a sense of who they are and what they're experiencing. So what we want to do is put you in the place and allow you to go in, interact with the buildings, but more importantly, interact with the people. So what we've been trying to figure out is the best way to approach that interaction, that storytelling. And we started looking at the indie game industry for cues on how to do this. This is a screenshot from a game that's called Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. It's a very small indie game. It's absolutely beautiful, though. It's this narrative-driven adventure game, or it's a walking simulator, basically, is what it is. And in this game, the character, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but the character takes the form of this, like 100-foot tall skeleton that's walking across Depression-era United States. In this, you kind of see, it's hard to see on here, but there's these little icons. And the whole idea is that you, the whole point of this is to walk across the United States, interact with people, get their stories. Stories are the currency of this game. It's what moves you along in this game. What they did is rather than staying true to the virtual reality nature, or the 3D nature that they built into this game, which is very beautiful, they skip to this. When you go from walking through space into interacting with a person, they kind of go into a different mode. So what happens whenever you approach a person or a group of people, as indicated on the map by these little icons, you go into this kind of introduction screen that you have a decision on how you want to interact with this person based on the vibe you're getting back from them. But you also have this decision tree that you can make. Do you want to be antagonistic towards them? Do you want to be kind and warm to them? And once you get past this kind of threshold, you go into this deeper decision-making tree where you're basically looking at a two-dimensional drawing, animation of this character. But what it is you have this much easier ability to follow and focus on the storytelling. And the idea here is that the more stories that you tell and the more true stories, you have the decision to make of whether or not you want to be truthful with them or bluff them. But the more genuine you are with them, the more they open up and the more they give you the stories that are the more valuable to you. And this perfectly matches what we're trying to do with our Winter Scene of Brooklyn VR. We want to make the stories that you're getting back from the people important. So we're looking at this model for that. By the way, this is a game I found out later that the soundtrack, the voiceover, the main voiceover narrator was done by Sting, a musician. But we knew we had connections to this because I knew that some of the development was happening in West Arkansas. And it turns out that one of the people that worked on the soundtrack for this was a security guard in our galleries, which I knew her. I knew she was a very talented musician. But I was talking to her about this game. It's like, there's a game you have to hear about this. It's beautiful. It's exactly right what you need. What you're interested in. She's like, oh yeah, this. So it was really great. It's brilliant. It's on Steam if anybody's interested in it. It's $20 and it's a beautiful game. Another experiment in immersive interpretation that we're working on is a project that's called Project Beckon. This is a project that's funded by the Knott Foundation's Prototype Fund, and we're working on developing a testable prototype by next February. So the Knight Foundation's Prototype Fund, their whole purpose for this fund is to look for ways to connect people to the use of technology. So what we're looking at doing with this is to take and remove the tedious task of accessing interpretive audio in a gallery and just completely removing that just out of the equation completely. So this whole, the foundation for this idea is built around this idea that the gallery is an interface for browsing the art. It's this physical interface. We walk into a space, we can quickly look around, see what catches our eye, and we can walk up to that. It's very intuitive. We've been walking through spaces our whole existence, so we're looking for ways to use that to allow people to browse the audio. So what we're going to do with this, I say going to do or trying to do because we're actively developing this as a prototype right now, is we're going to use augmented reality technology to very precisely pinpoint what essentially is a virtual speaker in space in front of the paintings. And then the user, who will be wearing headphones, will be able to hear this, and using binaural stereo in the space, they'll be able to convincingly and accurately kind of pinpoint where that sound seems like it's coming from. So what this will allow us to do is to essentially give the painting its own sound. So we're treating it as if the painting is a window into the scene that's portrayed in the painting. We're also going to be using bone conducting headphones with this, which uses connection with the bones in front of and behind your ear that'll leave your ears open and allow you to still hear the ambient sound in the space very well. So it doesn't shut you off from what's going on around. It kind of gives a little bit more of a realistic feel to the sound that you're hearing. So this kind of provides some design problems because we want to design this in a way that is relaxing and is intuitive, but it isn't kind of this cacophony of sound as you walk through. So we're looking at this system of these thresholds. So the effect is when you walk into the space, you'll hear very subtle beckons from each of the paintings that are activated in this. So if you have a landscape, you might hear a single bird chirping. If it's a George Washington portrait of him standing in front of the battlefield, you may hear a Revolutionary American era muskets or cannons shooting. And then as you walk into the space and pass another one of the threshold, everything else just kind of mutes out, and then you're kind of immersed in the soundtrack. And again, since we're using 3D audio here, as you walk in, again, if it's a landscape, you'll hear the sound of wind through the trees all around you, and giving you that data through audio that frees up a voiceover track to talk about the subjects and the other things in the painting that don't necessarily need to have their time taken up by describing the scene or setting the scene. I think this is going to be a different way to share important data from the painting. Just real quickly, a couple of other projects that we worked on. The Kindred Spirits VR painting. So the last two projects were kind of experiments in empathy. Empathy doesn't always have to be the goal, just having fun and engagement. Getting people interested in the project is also a very valuable direction for us. So this is Asher B. Duran's Kindred Spirits, painted in 1849. And this is kind of our first entry into virtual reality. So this is just a quick screen grab. So basically what this is we took one of our audio guide tracks and then we just created this video to go along with it. So you start out in the gallery, as you saw here. And then as you watch it, there's an audio guide track that's playing exactly as if you're standing in front of the painting. Then as it goes, it actually takes you into the painting, and instead of requiring you to kind of look around from piece to piece, what it does is it actually kind of takes you from spot to spot in the painting. It was very important to us that this be accessible to anybody with any internet connected device at all. So this is not true VR, it's 360, a spherical video, and it's hosted on YouTube. So that means it plays equally as well on a mobile device, iPad, desktop. This is the desktop version here, you can see the hand. But we want this to be something that anybody could have access to and could enjoy. Also, our approach to this was really pretty simple. Basically what we did is we took the painting and we chopped it up into layers, and we separated those layers out into 3D space and After Effects, and we created a virtual camera and moved the camera around the space. It took a while to figure out, but once again, it's a very simple process. As a matter of fact, I'm working with a group of 5th graders, 10-year-olds from a local school right now that are building out their own versions of this right now. Much simplified from this, but it's very accessible to them. And also one last thing, like I said, it was important that we start getting our visitors used to introduced to virtual reality. So this plays very well on a large touch screen. We also have we made branded VR cardboard viewers that we can hand out to anybody that wants them. And as a matter of fact, I've already handed out all of my cardboards, but there's a few just plain ones on the table back there. If anybody wants to grab one on your way out, please feel free to grab those and take them. And that's it for me.
Hi everyone, can you hear me back there? I'm Dennehy from Minneapolis Institute of Art. If anybody's not familiar with, so for anyone not familiar with the Encyclopedic Fun Art Museum, a collection of about 90,000 objects spanning culture and time. Now I'm not here today as an expert in virtual reality, or any reality for that matter, but as someone who spent the past 25 years producing visual content, mostly photographs for various museum purposes. I've thought a lot about how to use images and to convey information about artworks, and I've seen quite a bit of change and development in the methods we use to share and produce pictures. So I'm just going to give you some thoughts about VR, my thoughts about VR, and then I'll tell you what we've been up to at NEA. So what I love about Shane's title for the session is that it makes us stop and calm down and consider that 3D or VR isn't just about showing off the coolest technology or being the first to have the latest gadgets in the gallery. It's about communication. And when you think about it, one could argue that viewing paintings in a dark cave under flickering light were some of the first immersive experiences. What we're doing today is basically satisfying the same human needs in a new technological moment. Using images to help us step into, see an alternate reality or a potential reality. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we going to do with these new tools? And what are we going to say to make our lives better and to make a difference in the world? I've been listening to a podcast called Voices of VR. It's hosted by a guy named Kent Bai. And he's interviewed hundreds of people about this topic, and he's got some very interesting ideas about where virtual reality, augmented reality is going. And he predicts that ultimately VR is going to impact every dimension of our lives. And he came up with this visualization of a VR landscape, looking at the different domains of human experience. And I thought it fit nicely into the theme of the conference. So to quote Bai, he says that VR has the potential to more fully express and explore the full complexity of human experience, usher us from an information age into an experiential age, and catalyze a new renaissance that unlocks the latent potentials of our creative imaginations. So if you look at the various bubbles here, you see some places where VR already has a foothold, like in entertainment and gaming, and in communication, places like VR chat have millions of people communicating in VR. Yeah. And then we know now that in technology and medicine, they're using it to simulate real-world experiences to train doctors, or even to help patients mitigate pain or overcome anxiety and things like that. In architecture and design, they're pre-visualizing outcomes to avoid costly mistakes. But I think one of the most interesting aspects is empathy and partnership. We have the ability maybe to see through other eyes and experience other lives. And I was reminded of a VR project by the film director Iñárritu, who made Birdman and Revenant, and he won an award at Cannes this year for a project called Carne y Arena. It means sand and flesh, and it takes a viewer on a VR experience standing in sand where you cross the border with a group of migrants, and get captured. And it's said to be a very powerful mind-opening experience. So this is some of the things we maybe can look forward to. But we're not really there yet, and so it's good to put it in perspective for now. And this is the title of a recent blog post by Palmer Luckey. He's the founder of Oculus VR. So the question is, what will it take before we're walking around with AR glasses and can't live without them, like with our phones? And similar to with the adoption of cell phones only a few years back, all it takes is the right device, sufficient content libraries, an app like an app store or streaming services, and a network to support the infrastructure, right? Just like it happened with the phones. And if the past is any indication, this next step will be upon us before we expect it. So, where do we find meaningful content that will provide deep engagement and quality experiences in VR? It's easy. We're museums, right? We have lots of content, lots of meaningful content. So we should anticipate a time in the not too distant future when there will be an expectation, even a responsibility, to share our content across immersive, interactive platforms. And this is where I see the role of imaging professionals at museums. Like right now, we're spending a lot of our time making 2 and 3D pictures, 2D pictures of 3D objects. And that's fine for print or flat viewing, but it has limited utility in a virtual environment. And in fact, it's far less information in a 2D image than there is in a 3D model. So one fairly easy, straightforward way to jump into this with photogrammetry. I think most of you are familiar with the term photogrammetry by now. The guys at Smithsonian explained it yesterday. It's basically a concept that's been around since the earliest days of photography. It's what's behind most of our aerial geomapping that we see on Google. And it's basically creating 3D models from lots of photographs. So here's, some of you may recognize Charles Walbridge, our lead collection photographer. He's building a 3D model of a bronze vessel. And you can see with the assisted robot, it spins the object and a gantry arm moves up and takes hundreds of pictures from every angle. And at the end, we put in these measurement bars so you can get the scale right. It's accurate down to, they say, hundredth of a millimeter. I haven't measured that close. So then you bring in some software, it analyzes all those camera positions that you capture. It creates a triangle mesh, fills that mesh into a solid form, and then it projects textured tone onto the object. And there you have it. You have something that you can move around and manipulate in 3D space, and can be used in virtual applications. So why photogrammetry over other 3D scanning methods? Well, first of all, a lot of museums already have photo studios, and they have the tools and workflows in place to carry this out. We've done a little bit of experimentation with other types of scanning devices, and in our view, you get better color and surface appearance than other 3D methods. Something very important from a preservation aspect is the raw data can be preserved and reused as processing algorithms improve. You take good photographs, you can feed those through renderers that are going to improve over time. And then to put in a plug for Cultural Heritage Imaging out in San Francisco, they offer a 4-day training for museum professionals, and it's very sound methods for carrying out photogrammetric processes. So, in spite of all that a 3D model gives us, there's still some obvious shortcomings, especially in terms of color and surface appearance of the objects. And that's something that museum people tend to be pretty fussy about. So we have a pretty high expectation of accuracy when reproducing works of art. So on the left, you see a photograph. It's pretty accurate depiction of the object. You see subtle color. You can even see, not a great projection here, but you can see like the surface reflection, even though this is more or less a continued flat object. On the other side, you see a 3D model, which kind of looks like an illustration or a cartoon, right? It's an abstraction of the original. It doesn't quite capture all of the beauty. But nonetheless, as an illustration, it has more data. You can get measurement data, volumetric data, surface elevation data, unlimited points of view, right? But even with that, we still want more. We want it to be better, right? So help is on the way. We've been fortunate to have formed a collaboration with 2 computer scientists from the University of Minnesota. And they've developed an image-based rendering system that can be added to the photogrammetry pipeline. What it does is that it blends the actual photographs. So you feed in your OBJ model that you create in some type of modeling software. You take the camera positions and you take the JPEGs, and then this renderer will apply those JPEGs in a dynamic way and gives a very realistic photographic appearance to the object. Another interesting thing is, rather than the conventional way of lighting, soft lighting with for photogrammetry, it uses a flash on camera, which a lot of people have already, and it's easy to use. So you go around with a flash on your camera, the pictures you produce, they can then calculate the position of the light and the camera, and I'll show you rather than try to explain. So here now on the left, you see what's produced from PhotoScan, conventional 3D model. And on the right, you see this lumograph that you can view in their rendering. And as you can see, this looks kind of like plastic or something, and the other looks like gilt bronze, but it is. You can see the surface appearance is much better, reflected specular reflection. So, and here it is in action. It's called IB relight. So now, because they can calculate the relative position of the lens and the camera, and the light, they can also create virtual lighting situations. What you see here is just the model being turned around. You can see the reflective properties. But now you can add lights. You can add up to 4 virtual lights. And as you move it around, you can relight the object. So this is really useful from for a curator who wants to see the object in raking light. You can pretty much simulate any studio lighting situation just by moving these lights around. There are 4 lights. And these are these little widgets you see here that help you So you can move it in, you can change the intensity, you can change the color, and you can pretty much make it look like it does in real life. And so it is kind of processing intensive software because it is pulling up the JPEG images that you do.
Is this like an RTI then, basically?
It's kind of like an RTI in a way in 3D, yeah. So, now another interesting thing, the second here is going to turn off the lights. Right? And then you can add environment maps, 360 environment map photographs that simulate the light. Now here he's taking a walk around the lake in Minnesota, but you can get the idea. It simulates that lighting, right?
Yeah.
So, and the next one you'll see the lighting is in late afternoon, and the color, changes and the direction changes. But you can imagine if you created an environment map of a temple or a palace in China under candlelight, you can simulate the environment in which the object actually existed at one time. Or you can, see what it looks like under gallery light. So you can create any number of environment maps, and it's basically simulating that lighting.
The lighting's being added after the photo scan model's been created? You're not photographing, you do the photogrammetry for the photo scan or whatever the program.
Right.
But then do you do additional photography with lights?
No, you just do this flash on camera photography. Flash on camera. You make all the captures, just like we were doing with the robot before, except you have a flash on the camera rather than the overall lighting.
You have to do that during capture.
During capture.
Not subsequent.
Yeah, not subsequent, yeah. The environment apps you add subsequent. So, these guys, Gary Meyer and Michael Tetzlaff, they just presented at Cultural Heritage in San Francisco, or Digital Heritage in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. They released it open source. There's their website. You can download it as a PC version. They're working on the Mac version. I have the Mac version here in beta if anybody wants to see it afterwards. And that's a pretty cool object that I can show you in real time. It's not something I'd want to do live here. So, in the meantime, there's no WebGL for that yet. It's a standalone software. In the meantime, we're using Sketchfab, and we're hosting models on Sketchfab. Sketchfab's a wonderful platform. So, there's over 500 cultural heritage organizations already on Sketchfab. We're in the top 20 for followers. If you go to our site, we have about 90 models up right now. We have about 90 in draft mode. We have this great, Charles did this great blog post about photographing small objects, which are difficult to capture all the focus on. And this is a Netscape. It's only about a piece of ivory, only about 2 inches tall. So this is an experience you just could not get in the game. This thing, even to get that close to it is hard. You have to basically hold it in your hand and see it like this. So, it gives the viewer the experience of what the details like, and you can move around. It's as close as anybody's going to get to holding it in their hands, except for maybe the curator. And then there's always some surprises. How often you can see the bottom of an object? So, why Sketchfab? It has a powerful 3D viewer. It has tools for enhancing the models. You can play with the texture maps, the shaders. They're doing frequent platform development. It's constantly improving. They have a worldwide user base. We have hundreds of viewers. The models have been downloaded hundreds of times as well. It's free for cultural heritage institutions. That's a bonus. And you can embed their viewer in your own platforms too. So you can embed it in your website. So they also have VR capability. If you want to put a headset on, they have software on a PC where you can view it with an Oculus or any other headset. This is the settings table for that. Now I'll just show you a couple of interesting uses. This is an Augsburg cabin, a beautiful 16th century cabin. Is it moving? Oh, no, it was moving. Well, let me skip to the virtual gallery. Let's play that. Is it going?
It's trying to.
It's trying to? That's not hard. Let's go back to the menu. There we go.
There you go.
So you can add annotations. And you can create a sequence of views in the first steps, or it could be interactive. You can view it from all sides. And the great thing about this is now you can also animate, so you can see the inside and other parts of it. So this was done, we had a student actually built this model, and then we wrapped it in photographs. We wrapped the textures around it. So the model was built by measuring the object, and then he added the animations. So, another thing we've been doing is we have a few different animations online. Next one. It should go by itself. There we go. So we have this show called Egypt's Sunken Cities right now, and they brought these huge colossi into the galleries. And we have a collection of very small little Egyptian objects. So we have this tomb wall in the background, and then we have these small objects. Well, how can we make these, make this a more interesting viewing experience? So we created a little gallery inside the big gallery, so you can kind of view them as if they were life size, because otherwise they're only a few inches long. We have a number of different galleries, and also it's another situation. We can annotate these, and what we do is we usually will create links to the models, so you can view the gallery, you can click on any one of them, and then go and examine the models independently. Here you see one problem with virtual reality right now. It's like this idea with focus. You can't really capture the way our vision works. So, there we go. So in closing, I'll say a little update. Walter Benjamin's ideas about reproducing art, hold true. The reproduction of the work of art by any means cannot completely capture the aura of the original masterpiece, but it can certainly help to enhance our understanding of art and share our collections with a broader audience worldwide. That's all I got.
All right, hi everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm a little shorter than these guys. So I'm Samantha Diamond. I'm the CEO of CultureConnect. Our focus at CultureConnect is on digital interpretation, so connecting visitors to the collection. I've been really passionate about 3D for the last couple of years and its potential, and we've heard a lot about the potential and how it's already on its way to being achieved. But I think there's been so much rapid improvement in the software and the hardware that I am going to make a prediction here today that in 10 years, 3D is going to be as ubiquitous as 2D images are today. You can hold me to that. In 10 years, I'll still be coming here to MCN. Photogrammetry in particular, I think, has seen really big advances in the last couple of years. And I think that's really important for cultural institutions. As you were saying, you can adopt this in your existing photo studios, but it's also making it much more accessible to the general public. But I'm going to talk a little bit about 3D scanning, just about the technology and its relationship here, and in some cases there's a relationship with photogrammetry as well. So 3D scanning's been happening for a long time in museums for scientific research purposes and in conservation departments. And I wanted to point that out today because in your institutions, if you're not a conservator or in the research side, there may actually be scans that you can take, that you can utilize in an interpretive context. And I'm going to walk through a couple of examples of that as well. But in the images here, it's showing a number of different hardware and methodologies that are used to capture scanning data. And there's many different devices. I'd say the least expensive device, if you were looking to buy one and start experimenting in your museum, would run about $18,000 to $20,000. So with that in mind, if you are looking to do 3D scanning, making partnerships, as Shane talked about, might be a good idea, whether that's with local universities or service providers that do the scanning. We do not do the scanning, we partner with scanners. So you use the different technologies kind of depending on the circumstances. Are you doing a scan of an entire room? Is the object far away? Is the object very large and outside, or is it something very small? And then of course everything around the materials, the size, and if it's in motion. So, but at the end of the day, I think you should always be thinking about your goals. And I wanted to give a quick framework of like questions you might ask in terms of the goals around the data capture that you're doing. So all the way at the top, your goal could be measurement. This is where accuracy is the most important thing. You're going to have extremely high resolution scans. It's going to be like tens of millions of polygons. And this is really great for measuring change and for a lot of industrial applications as well. But in the museum context, for scientific, very detailed scientific research, you can measure erosion, decay, and measure distances on objects. Sort of in the middle, we have documentation. So this is where you're capturing data and sometimes color for visualization. It can be a wide range, medium to high resolution. And this is really probably most frequently used in conservation and research purposes in museums. And then third, which I am focused on a lot, is the visualization piece. So the aesthetic is really important, and some of the stuff that Dan was talking about, getting the lighting right, making it not look like an illustration is really important. So this is going to be medium to lower resolution. And when I say low resolution, I don't mean the elephant up there like that low resolution, just in comparison to measurement scan data. And this is great for general research and sharing, like on Sketchfab, which I'll talk about, and great for interpretive purposes. So I want to just walk through a quick example of kind of making this connection in your institution between conservation projects and interpretation opportunities. So at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, they have one of the only surviving full-length sculptures of Caligula. It's very rare. They had, after his death, they had mainly destroyed them. So the curators and museum curators and some scholars from UVA collaborated with a scanning partner to scan the statue. First, to investigate, from a scholarship standpoint, to investigate the original color of the statue and also the history of restorations over the centuries. It's also going to serve as a digital archive, so this is that documentation piece, at a starting point for digital restoration, which is pretty exciting. So an example of the digital restoration here, this is the original scan, and then next to it is showing the digital reconstruction of sort of the decayed drapery in the back. Similarly, the ear is what's been, I don't know if you guys can see on this projection, but the ear has a lot more detail and it looks like a real ear once it was digitally reconstructed. So just kind of looking at the process in a stream. So you start with just this photograph, 2D photograph. Then there's a data scan of the existing statue. Then, and you can see there's no color, it's just a data scan. And then the digital restoration, adding back the arms, fixing the drapery, the ears, the nose. And then third, doing digital painting. So the curators and the scholars collaborated with the scanning partner who put the statue back in its original form. We're so used to seeing, and visitors are certainly so used to seeing so many ancient sculptures in white stone, but back in their, the first century, they were actually red and blue and yellow and gold leaf. And so this is really what they looked like at the time they were created. Yeah. So then we're gonna kind of make this leap to the digital interpretation piece. So now the conservators are doing all this amazing work, all this amazing study, and I think there's a really compelling interpretation story. So you can first absolutely just have the traditional interpretation, what is this piece, its significance in history, but then you can share the conservation story, revealing not just the process that I just very quickly walked you through, but also this is critical work in museums that's often out of view from the visitor. They're not aware that all of this happens. So it's a way to kind of educate the visitor on the importance of this work and how these objects actually end up staying through the centuries and cared for by institutions, which I think is important, just reinforcing to visitors the value of museums beyond just a place for enrichment. And then of course they have the opportunity to examine the model. So using a touch screen, they can rotate, zoom in, and see it from all angles, and view that. And this interactive actually includes several of the scans, so they can explore it at its different stages along the way. Another project that we worked on was at the New York Historical Society. They did a major renovation of their open storage galleries. So the before picture would have been like a warehouse with shelves of just objects on it. And they decided to do a renovation and really like select fewer objects, it turned out to be about 450, and install them in these cases. So there's two types of cases. One types of cases have the themes like port and infrastructure that you see, and the objects are kind of grouped according to that theme, but then the towers, kind of every couple of cases, are like curio cabinets, so there's no identifying information, and it's just a lot of objects, and many of the objects are up way above your head, and you can't really see them completely. So they have these challenges. The objects are out of sight, they're out of reach, of course they're behind glass, and you've got these limited viewing angles because the cases are solid on three sides, and so you're only able to look in on one side of glass. So we installed kiosks. I guess you can kind of see them here, this kiosk, throughout the gallery to help visitors identify the objects, explore the interpretive story, but also feature all of these 3D scans. This particular example is kind of a great one in terms of this bowl is like about this big and it's on a shelf very high up, and it has two very different scenes painted on each side, and there's a lot of detail kind of painted in the base. So visitors can very easily learn interpretive things about it, but then also really take a look and zoom in and see the details of what's going on in the scene. I also think that giving visitors it lets them almost touch the object. It's like the next level of connecting to the collection, but it also frees them to decide what angle to look at the object. When you're taking a 2D photograph, you have to often make a decision that you're looking at a statue from this angle versus this angle. So you're making almost a curatorial decision when you're taking that photograph. So having the 3D available to them to look at it from all angles or the angle that they choose is a bit of an empowerment for them. And then in this example, you stole my line about seeing underneath. This is incredible how people are fascinated with the stitching underneath a chair like this, or what does the chair look like from behind. So it can be also creating more interactivity and something a bit more special than all of the scrolling of images that we do all day long in our life. Okay, so I want to get a little technical for a moment and just talk about what are some criteria for selecting objects. So you're sitting with your curators or interpreters or educators, and you're thinking about what's going to go into an interactive. And perhaps these folks that you're talking to don't have a firm understanding of what makes for a good object to scan or to photograph. So just one example would be avoid shiny, highly reflective or transparent objects when you're dealing with light or lasers. It's very difficult for that to be captured, and also have the light be appropriately following the object around as you spin it. So one potential, like if you did really want to scan some glass or lampshades or something like that, could be dusting the object with talcum powder or cornstarch. That's pretty horrifying in the museum setting most of the time. So you might end up just avoiding these objects. Avoid objects with hair or fur, or at least certainly wait until you're maybe more experienced before you take on these more challenging objects. So hair or fur or objects with extreme detail can just be more challenging. Things that are floating in the air like a limb or a leg like of a chair. These are not impossible things to overcome, but it's if you're trying to get started or get the most bang for your buck and the most bang for your time, think about going with these sort of simpler objects that are matte, neutral materials. And then one thing that came out of this project at the New York Historical Society was that the curators had picked a number of objects they were really excited about to showcase, but some of them were just too big. I think there was Lincoln's head. It's like this gigantic thing that couldn't really easily be taken out of storage before it was installed to do the scan. There was a cot that was Washington's cot from the Revolutionary War. It was so delicate with these natural materials. So that's another consideration just when you're selecting the objects with the curators, kind of something that could probably fit on the studio wheel that you showed us. If it's like kind of this big, you're probably good to go. So, and So we developed this assessment and decision tool for curators and interpreters, and we did this along with the technical scanning partner we brought in. So the curators started out, they selected 50 objects that were their wish list. And they don't have to understand all of the do's and don'ts about object selection. Let them just, in this process, we just let them kind of pick what they wanted. And then the technical partner went back and evaluated the time and difficulty and complexity that would go into scanning and producing the final version of any of these objects. And they came up with this point system in this grouping. So column A is really easy stuff. Each one only gets 3 points. Column D is super complicated. You can see it's a lot of Tiffany lamps and glasses and things like that. That's 13 points per object. And they said to the curators, pick as many as you want, and the total points across the board, if they can come in under, I think it was 120, you'll be within the budget that you set. And so the curators then, this was a decision tool that didn't require them getting into the weeds of the technology, but also something they could understand around making a decision about what was most important to them from a curatorial perspective and fit into the budget. And then my last example that I wanted to just mention is this new exhibition that just opened at the National Gallery of Art. I met with the conservation team there. This is a contemporary piece by this artist Rachel White-Reed out of the UK. She takes casts of the interiors of rooms, and then you can kind of see the lines, breaks them up into blocks, and there's a sort of metal structure kind of keeping everything together. And this piece has traveled quite a bit. It's gone to, I think it was owned by a private collector, and it went around to a lot of museums before it ended up here. And so it's kind of decayed over time, and a couple of the blocks cracked and broke, and so the conservators did a scan for condition reporting and repair, but then they also did a scan of the entire installation and the interior, so that visitors could understand the conservation story, the artistic process, and see inside kind of how this thing was constructed. I just thought this was a really, they're a very impressive conservation team over at NGA. Okay, and then the last slide, I just wanted to talk about some resources. You've heard all about Sketchfab. They're really great. My company, CultureConnect, we have a platform that supports 3D models. And I'd say for us, we will integrate with Sketchfab, and then we also have our own player for offline mode. So if you do end up having a very large data-heavy model, we can support that. But Sketchfab is really great, and I think one of the most compelling things, aside from the technology and the tools that they offer, is the ability to share. So this is a big thing about access, and really giving people all over the world access to the collection in such a compelling way. And then finally, I just learned about this recently because I think it's a new release from Google, Google Poly, which is sort of Google's version of Sketchfab, I guess. And of course, I think this is just a nod to mainstream adoption. So if Google's making a play in it, it's happening to people. So that's all I have for today. Thank you all very much, and we're going to go into Q&A now.
We only have just a couple of minutes, so we'll probably just take a couple, then if anybody wants to talk to us, we'll just move everything on the hall. So does anybody have any questions?
So we've all heard a little bit now about sort of 3D with collection, 3D in exhibition. Where do you think there's the most bang for your buck or interest in if a museum's doing nothing with 3D? Where's the best spot to start? Is it with the collection, or is it with exhibition interactive materials?
I think that, there's three of us up here, and the only thing keeping there from being more than three answers to that question is the fact there's only three of us, probably. And I think it depends on the institution and what your priorities are. Our approach has been much different than Dan's Museum's approach in that, we're starting with public engagement, putting stuff out there that the public can see and kind of interact with the collection that's already out there. Of course, our collection is less than a tenth of the size of MIA's, and is much newer, so that's not as much of a priority for us.
I would say just for getting over the initial learning curve, it's probably good just to start with some collection objects and stick them up on Sketchfab. And I think we learn a lot in that process.
And you don't need, a table like you make like smaller ones that connect
Right.
to
Yeah,
computer.
you can do it all handheld.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be that accurate.
Anybody else? Rob?
So, I imagine we've all heard about the acquisition of Flickr and the changes to their policies that will be somewhat disruptive to Flickr Commons, unfortunately. And so, what makes Sketchfab and their current policy of being free for cultural heritage organizations somehow different to Flickr and Yahoo versus the new one?
I wouldn't say it is any different. I mean, there's no guarantees, but it works for now. And you know, it's not like we're giving them all the content. We still have the content, so we could, you know, port it into any platform that emerges. But it's a good point. I mean, it's not going to be there forever.
Dan had mentioned the cabinet or furniture piece where you didn't scan it, but you had somebody build the 3D model
Build the
and
geometry.
build the geometry and then add photographs to that. Particularly to the other panelists, do you feel that that's also areas where people think, oh, they have to scan everything, but it might, especially like, oh, I want the empty gallery, just build a model or.
Yeah, I can actually speak to that a little bit. In the New York Historical Society project, there was quite a diversity of objects. We had some metallic objects where we just did a data scan and then applied a metallic texture to it, and metallic material. The chair that I showed was actually a data scan, and then we did photogrammetry and wrapped the photography around the data scan, which is kind of like another method, I think, for the chest that you did. So there's, I think, kind of to answer your question and the first question, I think there's always like a little bit of a trade-off in terms of what are your resources and time. Is this something that's experimental and you've kind of framed it that way, or is it something that needs to be really polished, or is this really for research purposes, and kind of balancing that out.
It's sort of a technology we're trying to find a market for it. We think there is. We're trying to find the market for it. You know, we have to get people who want this stuff.
I think it's going to be an expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they do want it, they're going to want it right away.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course. So practice now.
All right. We're over time, so thank everybody for